Hey everyone, welcome to our annual Great Victorian Fish Count Celebration Night, hosted by the Victorian National Parks Association. My name's Nicole. I have the pleasure of working for the VNPA for the last few years, and I'll be hosting the event. We will take a virtual dive into the story of our Great Southern Reef. Now, we at the Victorian National Parks Association acknowledge the many First Peoples of the area now known as Victoria and honour their continuing care for and connection to country. We support traditional owner joint management of parks and public land for conservation of natural and cultural heritage, and we offer respect to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are joining us today. Now, if you do know, you might like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands that you're tuning in from in the comments just now. For example, I'm joining you from the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. Now, before I introduce you to our first speaker for tonight, just want to talk about the theme that we've chosen for 2021, which is across our Great Southern Reef. I am a little biased towards this theme, because it's really where I started my journey as a marine ecologist, to a marine science communicator, and I guess general cheerleader. So my PhD looked at how climate change could impact temperate reefs, by looking at everything from the golden kelp that is kind of the real base of that ecosystem and the real heart of it to even the tiny little mollusks that were grazing in and under the canopy. So I'm very pleased tonight, really, that we can showcase some of the ongoing work in the area to raise awareness of our Great Southern Reef, which is not a very well-known reef. And hopefully drive, I guess, greater respect and care for it, as it really is a truly remarkable and connected ecosystem that is really worth protecting. So I'm going to dive pretty much straight in with our first speaker for the night. Her name is Sahira Bell. She is from the Great Southern Reef Project. Sahira is a marine ecologist and kelp forest enthusiast who is dedicated to understanding the impact of ocean warming and marine heat waves on Australia's Great Southern Reef. Sahira's mantra, people protect what they love and love what they understand, is the driving force behind her projects, where she takes a novel approach to marine science by combining traditional research with outreach to ensure her work contributes to positive change, which is really just quite brilliant, if you ask my opinion. So over to you, Sahira.
Thank you so much. What an introduction. I'm going to get straight into it. So I am a co-founder of the Great Southern Reef Project. My background is marine science or marine ecology, more broadly, and I have just begun a new role as a research scientist working for the Department of Biodiversity, Conservation and Attractions. So I'm based over in Western Australia for all you East and South Coast people. And my role as a research scientist is specific to the Nyari Capes Marine Park. So I'm pretty stoked about this because I'm now focusing on one spot, which is this epic little pocket of the Great Southern Reef, and using all this kind of background knowledge that I got from my PhD and that I'm getting from the Great Southern Reef Project, and trying to bring it all together into this management space as well. But today I am here to give the Great Southern, like you, Nicole, I am a cheerleader. I really like that term. I'm a cheerleader for the Great Southern Reef. And once you get me chatting about it, you definitely will struggle to get me to stop. The Great Southern Reef is basically this massive interconnected system that covers literally half of the Australian continent, but somehow nobody has really heard about it. There's this widespread lack of awareness and lack of consideration for our kelp forests, which are the defining feature of this reef. And it is definitely something that we at the Great Southern Reef Project are trying to change. And it's something that we feel really passionate about. We know the importance of this reef. We know the importance of these kelp forests and our seaweed communities and temperate reefs in general. We know how much they mean to the economy and to industries and to local communities, but we don't see this appreciation translate into kind of broad scale. And that's really what we're trying to change. But I don't think that words do the Great Southern Reef justice. So we're going to take a little bit of a dive and look at some underwater footage to give you guys an idea of what this place looks like. So the Great Southern Reef is dominated by kelp forests or golden kelp. This is the green stuff you see on these kind of boulders at the back. They provide food, they provide shelter, and they're really the base of everything that lives within the Great Southern Reef. And the reef is also home to so many cool and sometimes super weird creatures. It's has some of the highest biodiversity. It has organisms that are found along the Great Southern Reef and nowhere else in the world. And it also hosts some of like the super weird creatures like weedy sea dragons and dumpling squid and all those kind of really cool animals that, yeah, you definitely don't see anywhere else in the world. And it also is just as colourful, it's just as diverse, and it is so jam-packed full of life, which is a characteristic that many people don't really associate with cool water reefs or with temperate reefs. They just think of coral reefs when they think of these hustling and bustling places underwater, but our cool water reefs like the Great Southern Reef can be just as busy, they can be just as cool, if not cooler, than other marine ecosystems that we get across the state. And for 70% of Australians, it's the closest marine ecosystem to them. It is literally their backyard, but the majority of people have somehow overlooked this. They don't really realise that if they went to the coast and they put their head under the water, it's the Great Southern Reef that they're seeing. And this is definitely what we're trying to change. This kind of lack of awareness was really where the Great Southern Reef project stems from. And I just want to show you guys this quick video, which I think sums it up really nice, and you'll get to see a few of the key players involved in the project so far.
We were doing some work right across Australia, from New South Wales, around Tasmania, Southern Australia and Western Australia. Everyone we talked to was just so passionate about their local reefs, and everybody would tell you, oh, we've got the best local reef here, or we've got the best secret spot for fishing, or we've got the best wave here. And we realised that everybody was talking about the same thing. There's just this broad passion right across this place. We need to harness this energy and try to put a voice behind it.
Just like the Great Barrier Reef, we have a southern equivalent that is equally unique, it's equally valuable, and we basically felt that it deserved a great identity. And so what name better than the Great Southern Reef?
It was a really inspired idea to give it a name, because I think it then recognizes the interconnectedness of all these systems that are thousands of kilometers apart, but they share some very common features, like the presence of this golden kelp, along 8,000 kilometers of coastline.
Branding what we have out the front just makes sense. This, done properly, will be huge.
All people that are saltwater people feel that the spirit that comes from within the sea is something that is like deep within your blood.
You have to show people what is out there and educate them of how you respect that environment.
I think it's a great idea to identify the area as the Great Southern Reef. It gives everybody a name to put to something which supports the diversity of industries that we have here.
My hope for the Great Southern Reef is to unite a lot of the pride and passion that we see right across Southern Australia. We have some really large challenges facing the Great Southern Reef, and by uniting our efforts, uniting our calls to look after and protect the Great Southern Reef, we can achieve a lot and maintain it for future generations to come.
So that is really where the Great Southern Reef project was born. That really encapsulates the reason why we do what we do. We, as researchers, we knew the significance of this ecosystem. We knew how connected it was geographically and how it was really this one big interacting system. And we knew that on local scales, there were people connecting with this environment, even if that was in a very local or small scale way. And we wanted to show them that even though, yes, you do have these awesome little local environments, this and the communities and this system is part of something bigger. And that's really what we were trying to target there, and what we're trying to target through everything that we do through this project. And we've been working on a few different things and working towards this overarching goal of increasing appreciation of the reef and driving the next generation of stewardship for our kelp forests. But one of the things that I wanted to chat a little bit about today is one of our projects, and this is our suite of educational resources that we've developed. So this work is led by one of my colleagues, Stephen Andrews, who's a teacher and a photographer, and most of this content you see comes from him. And he has a background in marine science as well. And this work was originally a collaboration with National Geographic, and we produced these lesson plans and teaching materials that align with the Australian national curriculum that enables students to learn about their local ecosystems in school, as opposed to learning about systems that are potentially thousands and thousands of kilometres away. So this work is constantly being improved by us. We do have a suite of lesson plans already available on our website. That's the greatsouthernreef.com website. And these are targeted at Year 9s, and they're available free to use. We want everyone to use them. We want them to reach as far and wide as possible. And we cover a heap of different core themes. So this goes all the way from Indigenous cultures and connection to country, all the way through to sustainability and conservation. And basically the content is set out so that each lesson we have a teacher's guide, which is kind of what you see on the left of my screen here, and a set of slides that goes along with that teacher's guide. And these slides include the learning content, activities, and short films, just like that really quick film that I showed you just then. And really the whole goal of this was to create a really engaging and effective learning environment as possible. And they are being continuously developed. So not only covering more topics and more year levels, but we're also workshopping these lesson plans with teachers and with students to fine tune them a little bit. And we want these to be as easy, but also as effective as possible. And we're super keen for your feedback. So if you are a teacher out there and you're keen to get in on this, please jump over to our Facebook page. We have a Teachers of the Great Southern Reef group, and we regularly post links, we post updates, and also questions when we need a hand with things. We are super appreciative of your feedback as well. So this page is turning into a real hub of information, and it is being super useful. So in addition to these educational resources, all our other projects really are more generally working towards that driving recognition and driving appreciation of this ecosystem. And we're also lucky to have some pretty cool players on our side. So people like the legendary Sylvia Earle, who actually helped us announce the Great Southern Reef as a Mission Blue Hope Spot back in late 2019. And I wanted to show you this quick little video as well, which is a video from our announcement. And I'm hoping that it'll leave you a little bit inspired.
Thank you, Sahira and your community of champions for being a voice for the Great Southern Reef in Australia. What's special about that part of the world is the amazing diversity, and not just the diversity of life there in the ocean, but that there are creatures who live there and nowhere else in the universe. The exceptional diversity and unique forms of life. It reflects a deep and ancient history that is special to the southern coast of Australia. Certainly a place that we need to respect, understand, celebrate, and care for it. It's worth your support and the support of all of us to get behind and be a voice for the Great Southern Reef.
So that is where I wanted to finish up. I hope that last clip in particular leaves you a bit inspired and leaves you keen to get out there and start exploring the local places along the Great Southern Reef for yourself. I think that summer is coming, it's getting warmer, and it's getting so much easier to go out there and explore, that everyone should hopefully leave this webinar feeling super inspired, and especially inspired to get involved with projects like the Great Victorian Fish Count.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, Sarah. That was really great. And again, like getting Dr. Sylvia Earle to declare the place a Mission Blue Hope spot is a fantastic achievement, and you guys should be very proud of yourselves. So I don't actually think we have any questions. Does anyone have any questions specifically for Sarah just yet? We do have, someone was asking about Sylvia Earle, her deepness. So what I'll say is, if we don't have any audience questions right away, except for a nice little Dorothy Dixer from Kate in the background there. Kate asks, it's just gone away now. Love the term golden kelp. Who came up with that?
So this is actually a newish term. So if you Google Leuconia radiata, that's the scientific name for golden kelp, sometimes you're going to read that it's called common kelp, which is what it used to be called. But, common kelp doesn't sound very good. We didn't think it reflected the significance of what this species of seaweed actually means for the Great Southern Reef, and what it means for not just Australia. It's found in a few different places around the world as well. So we just started calling it something else, and we thought it has this beautiful golden colour to it. Why don't we call it golden kelp? That sounds much nicer. And we just started calling that, and it seems to have stuck. So yes, it is golden kelp, not common kelp.
Yeah, I love it. No, I think it is very important. I guess on the theme of trying to give the reef a bit of positive exposure and a bit of a rebrand. So I think they're clever.
Exactly. Yeah, we're up against. I say seaweed to anyone else, and the first image that they picture in their mind is this smelly, rotting stuff on the beach, and so that's what we're up against. We're changing this picture that everyone thinks of automatically. So we've got it tough a little bit.
Yeah. Well, we do have. Here's a good question. How can the general public get involved to promote further and share information about the Great Southern Reef to others?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. I'll give you the little bit of a generic answer is resharing our content. So we do put a lot of effort into make these not just these resources, but these super short films, and producing content that's informative pretty regularly. So that is definitely one option, is resharing this information that is hopefully you find it visually attractive and is underpinned by science and a team of scientists who are fact-checking this non-stop. That's definitely one way, and following us, resharing our content is definitely super helpful to us as well. But I'm also a super strong believer that I think everyone has certain people that only they can reach out to. So yes, it's one thing to go and chat to your group of uni friends who are all studying environmental science, where you can all froth out on the Great Southern Reef. That's obviously awesome, but it's really those people who are maybe a little bit less inclined to get so excited about these things that I think can be some of the most impactful conversations that you have. And I really think that there are certain people that only you have the ability to reach. So maybe that's your grandma who doesn't believe in climate change, or maybe it's your next door neighbor who also doesn't believe that running his aircon 24/7 is doing any harm. Or I think it's those kinds of conversations that you can find who the people are that only you can reach, and that's where really the impact can be, I think.
Brilliant. We'll do one more question just before we move on to our next speaker. For anyone who hasn't had their questions answered or just thinks of another question that they'd like to ask Sarah, like during Prue's talk, feel free to put them in the Q&A and we'll try and address them at the end as well. So the one question I did want to ask you while we have you and we have the presentation fresh is some of the materials that you've provided for schools suitable for the 6 to 8 year olds? Because as I am a Joey Scout leader.
So the material that's on our website is tailored to year 9s. So it definitely goes beyond them, but we are in the process of producing actual lesson plans and actual like set slides and set content for a suite of age levels. But that's also not to say that you can't adapt our content yourself. So for example, my mum is a primary school teacher, and she uses a lot of our content and just kind of takes some of the videos. She's picky with what she shows, and then she goes to year 3s and year 4s. So it is definitely possible. It's just not that super set out structure available just yet, but it is coming.
Fantastic. All right. Well, what we might do now is we'll say thanks again, Sarah, for your fantastic presentation. The next speaker for the night is Prue Francis. Prue is a lecturer in science professional practice and the course director of the Bachelor of Marine Science at Deakin University. Her research investigates the extent to which ocean literacy is being taught in schools across Australia, and she explores innovative methods and initiatives to enhance this through research, education and outreach, including through picture storybooks. So welcome, Prue.
Thank you, Nicole, and welcome everybody. I'm coming to you from the Wadawurrung country. I think I'm not alone. According to the chat there's quite a few of us. And I do believe a few ocean groves are there too. That's where I'm based at the moment. So let's get started. I do recognise I've got a few of my students online too, so they won't be new of how I present and make it quite interactive. So my name is Prue Francis. I'm from Deakin, as Nicole mentioned, and hopefully today I'm going to talk to you about ocean literacy. So it's very nice follow on from what Sarah's doing with the Great Southern Reef. I'm taking the knowledge and trying to get the knowledge out there, but also measuring the impact. So today and tonight, I'm going to sort of talk you through the steps and the journey that I've taken to get there and what's in front of us into the future. So just a bit of a background of who I am. I know some of you online probably know who I am quite well, but for others, as Nicole mentioned, I'm at Deakin and I'm the course director of the Bachelor of Marine Science at the Geelong campus. And I do have a marine ecology biology background, and also I am an ex-secondary school teacher. And I also used to work as the education coordinator for Reef HQ Aquarium up in Townsville. So I've got that sort of marine education tourism type background. And so I guess it's no surprise that I do teach marine science units at Deakin, but also I have a really passion for employability units as well, making sure that our students at Deakin are leaving us with really strong employability skill sets. And so I've taken that into the research field as well. So I bring my education background, but also my ecology and biology background into my research. So my PhD was on seaweeds, and particularly Neptune's necklace, the little poppy seaweed that you see on rocky shores. And I was looking at the dispersal potential of that particular seaweed. So I haven't been able to walk away from it. I still love anything seaweed related, as you can see me down here on the beach. So if you often see some strange lady looking at seaweed and getting really excited on an Ocean Grove or Queenscliff beach, it's more likely me. So come and say hello. So I'm looking at seaweed, but particularly seaweed cultivation. So looking at local species and the potential for them to be farmed potentially in Australia or the Great Southern Reef. And then also today's purpose, I'm going to be talking to you about my research in ocean literacy. And so I'm located down at our Deakin University Queenscliff Marine Science Centre, which we've been there now for, this could be our 3rd or 4th year down there. So we're co-located with the Victorian Fisheries Authority, which is, if you've been to Queenscliff and you drive past the building with all the grass on it, where the Marine Freshwater Discovery Centre is, that's where I'm located. Deakin has its own research and teaching facility there now. So let's have some fun with some interactivity. I don't know, this hasn't really worked well. Let me just flick it back. There we go. This is Mentimeter. So some of you might have used Mentimeter before. It's basically an online polling system. So you can become part of the presentation, so to speak, and help tell the story that I want to tell. So what we need to do, and hopefully Cade will put this in the chat for you to make it a bit easier, but if you follow the link up the top, which has www.menti.com, if you go to that, if you've got your browser open or on your phone, whatever it might be, and then you'll get prompted to put in a code. So the code's just 169308881. And then you'll have one question to answer, which is what we have in front of us. And I'm expecting it to be quite biased tonight based on the audience we have. And the question is, have you interacted with the ocean before? And what I mean by interacted, it could just be as simple as I've swam in the ocean, I've dived, I didn't swim, but I visited the ocean, put my feet on the sand, and I kind of tiptoed closely to the water's edge, but didn't go in. That's still an interaction. You might have been on a boat and gone fishing or just gone for a tour. That's still an interaction. So whatever it might be, say yes or no, and we'll see how we're looking. And as I said, I think I've pre-predicted what the answer is going to be here. And all the scientists out there, I think we could probably safe to say, is it going to be statistically significant? All right, I don't know how many people are voting, but I'm assuming we had about 60 online. So we're getting majority of people voting. So it looks like everyone has interacted with the ocean. So that's fantastic. The next question though, is how do you feel best connected to the ocean? So that interaction that you're just thinking of, what was it? Is it because you go surfing every day? Do you like to dive? Do you like to, like me, go and look at seaweed on the beach, or just go for a walk along the beach, go for a swim, whatever it might be? This is a word cloud. So you basically just need to write a couple of words in there, and it'll just sort of keep popping up on the screen. So it is anonymous. We won't know who's put what in. It just visually we'll see how we're all connected. And you might notice, for anyone that's local on the Ballerine, you might notice the dive stop spot behind us. This is Ozone Rec at Indented Head. And these, if any of my students are online that were in 107 in trimester 1, this might be you in the background. We took 90 students snorkeling at this site over 2 days, which was absolutely fantastic, before we were locked down, of course. All right, so we're seeing quite a lot of different connections coming up. Swimming and diving, snorkeling and swimming are sort of the main ones that are coming up, but there are a few: walking, rock rambling, photography. So the ones where we see in bold, it generally means that more people are putting those in. So that's kind of the most common. So it's like a graph, a word graph. So you would assume that swimming, diving and snorkeling are the most common for everybody that's connected. So we've got about 54 responses. So that's fantastic. So thank you for having a go at that Mentimeter. And the students are probably like rolling their eyes going, oh, here she goes again. Good old Prue with her Mentimeter. But it helps set the scene of how I want to take this presentation. So quick facts, and Sahira's already mentioned this, but everyone said yes, they were connected to the ocean in some way or form. So, and yes, tonight's audience might be a little bit biased, and so the greater community might have had a few no's. But in a snapshot, Australia, if you think about it, is an island, so it's a marine nation. We're all connected to the coast. And so there's rough data, but around about 70% of Australians live near the coastline or visit the coastline at some point in their life. And we rely on it. So we saw those different connections on the second slide there with Menti, and some of those connections were quite variable of how we use it. And so as a user, it can either be an environmental connection, a social, economic or cultural reason as to why we feel that connection to the ocean. And so in a snapshot, we rely on the ocean in many different ways, and we all have our own reasons why, and they may differ. Probably a lot of our reasons with our audience tonight are the same, but you know, different stakeholders using the oceans have different reasons why they feel that connection. But we still really don't know or haven't explored much of the ocean. And so Sahira mentioned that we still need to go out there and understand the Great Southern Reef and the ocean just in global terms, we haven't really explored it. In fact, we've explored more of the moon than we have of our ocean. And so we need to continue to keep doing that in order to keep protecting and restoring and managing that ocean as well. And we're doing that through our science and through our management and organisations like the Victorian National Parks Association. These are the things that we need to continue to do in order to take our next step into that ocean literacy, and hence why I'm chatting to you today. So we need to, and to do that, we need to make sure that we can continue to feel connected to the ocean and feel it in that either that economic, cultural, social, environmental way, and that we're all using the ocean in how we feel connected to it, but we're doing so in a sustainable and equitable way. And if we're achieving that, we're actually going to be achieving what we call a blue economy. And you might have heard that term thrown around before. And that's basically utilising our ocean and the resources that our ocean provides to us in the most economical way, but doing it in that sustainable and equitable way, taking into account all our connectedness to that ocean. But in order to do that, we need to understand it. Yes, we need to protect it. We need to restore it. And we need to sustainably manage it before we can even get to that point. But we also need to tell people about it. And that's what Sahira was talking about too, is trying to bring as much of our community know about the ocean, but also specifically in Australia, the Great Southern Reef, because we've all heard of the Great Barrier Reef, but what we haven't heard is the Great Southern Reef. And it does contribute a huge amount to our economy in Australia. I think it's around about, this is probably old data, about $10 billion a year. And so you've got your fisheries and tourism and different aspects that all contribute to that economy. So if we were to stop looking after it and start exploiting it, then that money is not going to be coming into our nation. And we do rely on that income and livelihood to be able to do what we can do as a nation. So we need to be able to communicate people about it, connect them, as Sahira was saying, to the Great Southern Reef in order to keep protecting and using it in a sustainable way. So what I'm trying to do with my work is to help drive that communication, but do so in a slightly different angle to what Sahira and Sahira's team are doing, is doing it from a research perspective. So looking at ocean literacy. So what is ocean literacy? You might have heard it, you might not have heard of it. But so hopefully today I'll sort of clear up the ambiguity around it. And so first thing I thought was, how am I going to explain this? I thought, well, I'd go straight to Google if I was to try and figure out something. That's, we all do it. We Dr. Google, we use Google for lots of different things. So I went and typed in literacy, and I thought this showed it really, really nice and clear, the two definitions of what literacy is. And the first one you can see there on the screen is the ability to read and write. And yes, if we want to learn about the ocean, yes, we need to write about it. Yes, we can read about it. That's fine. But the second dot point that you can see here is the competence or knowledge in a specified area. And this is where ocean literacy has really sort of originated from, is knowing about the ocean, because that's the specified area. So in a nutshell, ocean literacy has been defined by this sentence now by the UNESCO in 2017, is an understanding of the ocean's influence on us and our influence on the ocean. So it's that bringing that connectivity again and how we're using it, and what it means to us if it was sort of taken away. And from that same UNESCO group back in 2017, what they thought is, well, how are we going to get this out to the greater community? And they came up with what is known as the ocean literacy principles. And you can see these 7 principles on the screen now. I'm not going to go into too much detail about them, but basically what they are saying is that an ocean literate person, and you're probably thinking, yeah, I'm an ocean literate person. An ocean literate person is the person that's defined as somebody who understands how we use the ocean, and how we are connected to it, and what it means to us. But the underlying factor of that is these 7 principles. And so what the UNESCO group are trying to do is say, hey, we need to make sure that everyone has knowledge of these 7 principles in order to be an ocean literate person. So underneath these 7 principles, there's actually another 45 fundamental concepts that underline in here. So the nitty gritty sort of science concepts that underline those 7 principles. So now what they're trying to do, not so much here in Australia yet, is trying to embed these 7 principles into curriculum. So into schools, into education programs more broadly, and this is sort of starting to gain traction around the world. So how do we achieve it? As I said, public awareness. So someone asked the question earlier, how can we get the knowledge of the Great Southern Reef out there? And it's just simple little things, you know, things such as those messages of turn off the light to save energy. That does gain traction if you start doing it, and other people will start modeling your behaviour. And the same thing is with the Great Southern Reef. Start using the Great Southern Reef in whatever terms you might be doing every day. It's like, oh, I'm going for a walk on the Great Southern Reef, to your mate next door, like, oh, what's the Great Southern Reef? And it just starts those little conversations there from there. So it does start to build traction, and we're starting to see more of it in the scientific community now. I know that our marine team at Deakin, we now utilise the Great Southern Reef term in our research work, and hopefully now we'll start to see that happening more, not only on social media platforms, but also in research publications too down the track. So informal education providers can start to use it, media, not-for-profit organisation, community groups, and that follow-on effect can be quite wide in reaching those different wider community groups that, you know, scientists can't sort of reach in the scientific community. Then there's also school and education, so embedding the ocean literacy principles in the curriculum, and what they've called that is the ocean literacy frameworks. So if you're sitting there and you're a teacher and you're going, I'm not putting that into the curriculum. Have you seen the Australian curriculum? No, thank you. Yes, I've been a teacher as well, so I totally understand and can relate to trying to embed this into the curriculum. So that's what we're trying to do here, is try and find creative ways of how we can embed it without putting more work onto teachers and more content for students to have to learn. So I'll come back to that in a moment's time. This is just a really quick snapshot of globally how ocean literacy is looking at the moment. And this is data extracted from a recent paper that's just come out from Kelly et al. In 2021. So it's looking at not just school programs, but global programs of ocean literacy. And so it could be free online resources similar to what Sahira was showing before that you can go and access. It could be short online courses or whatever it might be. This is where it's currently at. So remember, ocean literacy term came about in 2017. So you probably might be sitting there going, not really much happening. It really is lacking, but it's only been a short introduction to where that was. So maybe in the next 5 to 10 years, we might just start to see some of these percentages going up. And particularly, I'd like to see our little 8% over in our continent start to exceed and be sort of the world winners overall in ocean literacy, considering we are that marine nation. And these are just some examples of sort of the founders of the ocean literacy principles. So you can feel free to go and Google some of these organisations. But of course, they won't focus on the Great Southern Reef. These are sort of more their own or widely, broadly sort of marine environments. And I haven't looked at them in detail, but I could probably guarantee that they probably have a bit of a tropical flavour to them. So I do recommend watching the space on the Great Southern Reef website and looking at the more resources that are going to come closer to us, and so that students and classrooms and teachers can actually relate to the marine environment compared to what some of these resources might be. It's just, you know, different marine environments, different seaweeds, different looking fish. It's hard to connect with. But so this is all well and good. So it's great to have all these resources. And in fact, you could go down Google, you could be spending hours looking at what resources are down there and get quite overwhelmed by the content. So what I'm trying to do is look at what's there, and our team at Deakin Ed is trying to see, all right, we want to improve ocean literacy in Australia because we now know it's lacking. How are we going to do that? What are the barriers to that? But then also, because we're research scientists, we want to evaluate what the impact is actually having. So if we are going to implement these ocean literacy principles in Australia and do it in whatever way we might do it, is it actually connecting students to the ocean? Is it going to improve our knowledge of the ocean, and is it having the impact that we wanted it to have? So that's sort of what our mission is trying to do in our team. And as you can see here, we've got 3 main goals, and that's, of course, the first one, we're trying to identify barriers, which we're sort of going through with different stakeholders at the moment, assessing that. then also looking at the trialing solutions and then evaluating those solutions, whether they worked or not. And so if it didn't work, let's go to plan B, and then assessing that impact, as I said, about the connecting to the ocean. Did it work? Did it not work? So here, the current research that I am doing, so I can never do a presentation without showing off my two kids. So you can see my two little girls there. So the first research I'll focus on is a new area, which is on the right-hand side that you can see little video showing off there, is using a virtual reality and technology. And this is some early work that my colleague, Dr. Adam Cardellini at Deakin is producing. So credit to him for putting this little video together, is to create, using this technology to create an immersive environment. So, you know, a person will put a headset on and they'll be taken to the Great Southern Reef. And specifically for this particular content that you can see, it's going to be a sponge garden adventure under the sea. So making that immersive connection, if a student or somebody can't get to the reef or can't for some reason physically go diving or see what's underneath, this is another way where they can form that connection to that marine environment, and then hopefully, you know, create those ocean stewards as we want to. So if anyone is looking for a PhD and is interested, we are actually looking for a PhD student to lead that program into next year. So please reach out if that's of interest to you. But at the moment, what I wanted to sort of finish up on is what we're currently looking at, and that's overall arching children's literature and sort of seeing where we're at. Can we use books, children's books? We all love children's books. We love reading. We probably read them as a kid. If you're in a bookshop and you see one of the ocean, you probably have a quick flick to see what it looks like. So we sort of thought, okay, teachers use picture books all the time. They can relate to them. They feel comfortable using them. Can we use ocean picture books to teach ocean literacy principles without having to add more to the curriculum? Can we pull the Australian curriculum, a picture book, ocean literacy principles all together and achieve the same thing without putting too much pressure and too much time to the teacher? So that's what we're trying to do at the moment. So we've been surveying teachers. We've also been surveying informal education providers. So my honour student, Maddie O'Brien, who's online tonight, has been doing just that this year. And then Katia Freitas, my PhD student, is looking at the barriers that teachers are facing with incorporating marine science into their classroom. And then Katia's currently putting together a professional development program for teachers to be able to incorporate children's books into their classroom and teach marine science in a really effective way. So also from that, what we've also been doing, and this was a really fun project, is we went and read 100 odd picture books. We evaluated them, we wrote a paper about it. And that was probably one of the career highlights, is having to read 100 kids' books and then writing a paper about it. So basically what we're trying to do there is looking whether or not what the current status of is ocean picture books. So if we're going to sort of say to teachers, here, have a picture book and teach about the Great Southern Reef, is it actually going to teach them about the Great Southern Reef, or is it going to teach them about the Great Barrier Reef? So this is what we tried to do, is evaluate where the gaps are in ocean picture books. And we did find that there wasn't many focused on the Great Southern Reef. And we also found that, you know, trying to sort of highlight a female marine scientist to tell about the Great Southern Reef. So cueing our latest project, which is not quite typical science route, is Paul Venzo and myself and Kate James, as the illustrator, have developed our own children's picture book, which will be coming out next year, and it's called The Great Southern Reef. So it's going to be a lovely story about Professor Seaweed, as you can see on the picture here, taking two children along the beach and discovering things that you would typically find on a beach walk in the Great Southern Reef, and also finding animals and seaweed that you would typically find along the Great Southern Reef, so that if children are going to learn about this and read these books in a classroom or at home, they're going to go, oh, I saw that shark egg on the beach, or I saw Neptune's necklace when I went for a walk, and can connect to the ocean in a more effective way. And hopefully the teachers can also connect with the Great Southern Reef in a really effective way. So this is our next project, and it's going to have teaching resources. That's going to be published by Sahira Publishing, and they have online free teaching resources as well. So I do think it'll be a scalable resource booklet that comes with it too. So watch this space for next year. And I think that's it. Wrap it up. So I'm happy to take questions if anyone's got any questions or wants to learn more about ocean literacy. There is a test you can take to test whether you're ocean literate or not. It was a scientific paper. So if you wanted to have a trivia night one night when we're out of lockdown and test whether you're an ocean literate person, then please let me know and get in touch and I can send you that paper. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Prue. That was really interesting, and I'm certainly very excited to see the book when it comes out. I'm also quite curious to see how I would go at the ocean literacy test.
Aren't we all?
So I've noticed a few questions coming in that I'm actually going to save at the end because I think it'd be kind of cool to do it in a bit of a panel way. There's a few kind of like interesting questions in there. So I'll stick with the ones that are very specifically on your work, Bruce. One of the first ones that I saw was, I know you work with VR. Can you please tell us a bit about the evidence there is between the virtual nature or ocean experience and pro-environmental behaviours?
I don't know too much about what research is out there, but from my little understanding, I think that it's okay. There are some limitations with using VR, particularly with younger children and using the motor sensory sort of type development. It has been shown that adults are more coordinated and can react to virtual reality better than what children can. There's also a couple of other negatives with using virtual reality, which you wouldn't think of, but it's actually a thing, is head lice. Of spreading head lice by putting these headsets on. Motion sickness is another one. But in terms of creating environmental behaviour change, I would believe potentially yes. How you assess that, whether it's a long-term effect or a short-term type impact, I'm not sure. In my past, when I've worked at the aquarium, we used to run, or they still do, virtual outreach programs where a scuba diver was in the aquarium and was talking to the students all over the world. And we had a lot of environmental messages during those outreach programs. And a lot of the times it was just simple, just switch off your light tonight. And I think a lot of the times some of these students hadn't even, heard about Australia before, let alone seen a tropical ocean, and then being able to connect with that and connect with a scuba diver and someone who was actually a marine biologist, which they'd never talked to before. They sort of thought, oh, well, if they're telling, I want to protect that turtle that I saw on the screen, so I'm not going to use plastic bags anymore. So whether it might have helped, they might have gone home and told the parent, did that make a change? I'm not really sure. Let's say, yeah, we hope so.
I like this one. Do you have an ocean literature mascot?
Yes, kind of. I don't know if it was very obvious in the logo. It was like little weedy sea dragon, but it's made of books. I don't know if it was quite easy to pick up on. So that's our little Deacon Sea Ed logo. So it's the little sort of books. But moving forward, it would be great to have whether it's an animal or not. But we're trying to make sure that the picture book itself didn't have a marine creature that was a mascot or was a talking. We had to make sure that we want it to be non-fiction narrative, if that makes sense. So still factual but still telling a nice story without bringing in a talking fish.
Fair enough. I think what we'll do now is we will jump in to our next speaker. We've still got a few questions to go, so hopefully Prue can stick on the line at the end of the night and answer a few more questions. So thanks again, Prue. We are going to pivot a bit slightly for a few minutes, and we're going to hear from our marine campaigner, Shannon Hurley. So really, without any further ado, I'm going to jump over to Shannon.
Thanks, Nicole. And I definitely think you are definitely ocean literate. You're my two bobs worth. But also thanks, Sahira and Prue, for your talks. They were really inspiring to hear. So I just wanted to spend a few moments, and hello everyone, just wanted to spend a few moments really bridging the gap between citizen science and the campaigning work that VNPA does, and just kind of reiterate how valuable that knowing what marine life we have down there and the contribution that all of you make into citizen science actually goes directly into helping protect our marine and coastal environments that we all love. So just a little bit about sort of me and my role, or actually what led me into it, is that, yeah, I've been with VNPA now for about a bit over 3 years as a nature conservation campaigner. And I'll tell you a little bit more shortly what that actually means. But I didn't always start out to be sort of in the campaigning and advocacy space. Before that, I was actually out seeing and exploring our marine environment and working as a dive instructor and being inspired by the ocean, and also hearing a lot of stories about how it had changed over the years and how, due to climate and human impacts, that things weren't always what they used to be. And so I began to get really curious about that. And then seeing that for myself, I then became of the mindset that I really wanted to help advocate for the tools that would help us to be able to manage these areas in the best way that they could be, that we all love to enjoy. And so that's essentially what I'm doing now in the campaigning and advocacy space, which is advocating for all those tools and proper management and the policy and the structures and the governance, which don't sound very sexy, but they are actually the frameworks, which is what decisions are made that actually can make or break sometimes our marine environment. And sometimes these decisions are often made by governments and things like that. So it's really important that their decisions are sort of based on really good frameworks and governance structures and policy and all that kind of stuff. Because that's actually directly what goes into protecting all of these areas all the time, and also a lot of community who speak up to protect the places that they love. And so really, if we look at sort of that context and then look at citizen science for a moment, sometimes to advocate for these places that we love, we often need to know, and it's obvious for me to say this, but I think it's really good to reiterate, is what's actually down there. What is down there? And that's where citizen science comes in, because you all being the eyes and ears out there in our marine world, because let's face it, I'm not doing it as much as what I used to be doing it, and I miss it. So we need eyes and ears out there telling us what is down there, and particularly when it comes to new species that we haven't known before, or even improving our understanding of the interactions between different species. And so I wanted just to give a bit of an example where you may have heard of before is the proposed project for AGL's gas import terminal for Western Port Bay. So I think, obviously there was a lot of concerns about that, if that went ahead, the impact that would have on the marine life in the whole of Western Port Bay. And so really our job was to really engage with the decisions that were being made at the government level and what different marine life and marine habitats were actually going to be looked at in terms of what impact this project would have on those. And so we really need to put in and alert the government to our concerns that we had. And part of that was actually, one, is engaging experts to do some analysis of what different habitats are there and look at what was really needing some extra attention from this project going ahead, and what actually needed to be assessed in terms of its risks to these different species. But part of that is also really looking at the trends in those areas, and also that's where citizen science comes in, because the observations that you make and the data that's directly collected actually feeds in directly to then what we can actually feed into the government. And so, for example, we ran a BioBlitz day for Western Port with Kate and Nicole, and I'm assuming many of you actually came to that as well, where it was citizen scientists getting out and looking to see what was there. And we actually took lots of videos and got your, your inspirations from the day, because this can directly feed back into government, which can't be out there seeing this directly for themselves as well. And so because you're out there submitting data, that data actually directly feeds into the Atlas of Living Australia. And for example, in my position and many others who are also working in this field as well directly go to these websites and we look and we see, okay, what are the list of species that can be found there? And when we're actually making recommendations and putting forward our concerns for what we're concerned about with particular projects going ahead, we're actually directly feeding in like particular concerns that we might be having or areas of focus that we want the government to actually be looking at. And so and the data that ReefWatch collects actually directly goes into looking into, it actually directly gets submitted to the government, and for a lot of different processes where they write reports. So for example, and I won't get into the specifics of it, but you may have heard of the State of the Environment report. So this is a report that comes out every few years, and it sort of like a top line snapshot of how our environment is tracking. Well, there's actually a dedicated one for the marine and coastal environment, which is currently being developed at the moment. And so ReefWatch data is directly input into that. And so when that report is actually developed, they're actually looking directly at the data to see the trends of like fish populations all across the state, and that can be reported on. And then that's what we can actually use to advocate for better decisions to actually be made about how our marine and coasts are managed. So I just wanted to, and also the other point to make is that the state government loves citizen science and connecting people with nature. And so there's often money floating around and grants like that to be applied for. So that's just, I guess another just reassurance I just wanted to make, because sometimes it can be really difficult to sort of, especially when you're behind a computer to know directly the impact, or, not being, contributing directly to citizen science and actually not knowing where your data is going. So I just wanted to give some reassurance that it all makes an impact and is directly used to contribute to how our marine and coasts are managed and, and protecting what we love going forward.
Thank you, Shannon. And it actually is really important, I think, to remind everybody that like we're not just sending you out there to, yes, we're sending you out there to have a bit of fun and to take photos of fish and media banks and all that kind of thing. But for those of you that are wondering, where does this all go? Yeah, for sure. Places like the Atlas are things that marine managers and politicians and advocates can actually check in on. And so, it is really important to hear that it is actually helping make some sensible decisions about managing our marine environment. So thanks, Shannon. I'll oddly introduce myself as the last speaker for the night. And we'll get right into it. And then we'll finish off with questions for everyone at the end as a bit of a panel discussion. So over to me, I guess. So let's get into it. Great Victorian Fish Count, for those of you that did just kind of jump on tonight and had no idea what it is, maybe you've never done it, never heard of it before, a little tagline for the Great Victorian Fish Count is the dive that counts. Although I guess these days it's also the snorkel that counts. It's just that's less snappy, let's face it. So it's been running for about 16 years and counting. I'll try not to do too many puns, sorry. What it really does is it captures a snapshot of the fish within Victoria's coastal waters. And the fish that we've chosen, there's 35 species, including 10 species of sharks and rays. And they were selected really because they are kind of not commercially targeted in any meaningful way. And so there's not a lot of data on them. So that's what we wanted to learn a little bit more about their ecology and where they're kind of appearing. And basically what we have is that a series of like clubs and community groups will join in each year, and we do encourage them to adopt, say, like a regular site. You can do as many places as you want, but it's always nice to have kind of that ongoing data from a few locations around Victoria so that we can have this comparable data set going on for, as you've seen, quite a few years. Last year was an interesting year. I think that's probably a massive understatement, but we'll go with that. We really had no guarantees about this time last year that we'd be able to even go ahead with Great Victorian Fish Count, and guess what? It's been pretty similar this year. But last year, I can definitely say that I was well and truly blown away by the support from our community groups and our dive clubs. Our fish counters really did rise to the challenge of 2020, and I'm sure you can do it again in 2021. For a couple of quick stats, we had 25 groups complete 56 surveys all around the state, and actually ended up being one of our biggest counts per survey ever. So I have to say a big thank you to everybody who got involved last year. You did a really great job. For anyone who doesn't actually know what the count is, what we do is we get people in the water with these dive slates being illustrated in the photo just there, with good little illustrations of our 25, I guess, bony fish and our 10 sharks and rays. They mark off things in kind of increasing abundance categories as they see them. So a few fish, a few more fish, and then quite a lot. And in the end, you get this survey sheet and you fill it out and you give me all the auxiliary data and how many people were doing it. And then it goes into the Atlas of Living Australia, which, as Shannon said, was this online platform. So it's a thing that researchers and the public and marine managers can access. So it's automatically going in there and it's a fantastic resource. What we do with the data is once we've got it all, we'll collate it at the end, and we can have some, I guess, we have a bit of fun with the auxiliary data, so we can find out how many people, say, did a survey using scuba, which is still the most common, I guess, method for doing the survey. But we are seeing a bit of an increase in both snorkeling and kind of combination events where you get a few more, I guess, like family groups and school groups and stuff out to do like scuba and snorkeling. And the last couple of years, we've had a bit of fun with virtual fish counts. So using the underwater camera at Pope's Eye in Port Phillip Bay, in the Port Phillip Heads Marine National Park, which is a really cool resource, and it will be back online for fish count this year. So we're pretty excited about that because it has been quite a fun way to, I guess, bring the reef to people that kind of can't get out there themselves. What we find every year pretty similarly is that we have actually quite a lot of surveys take place in a marine national park or sanctuary. I believe it's something like 5% of our water, Shannon can probably correct me or not on that, being protected waters, but we have about 30% of our surveys taking place in these protected areas each year, so that's really nice. And I think people do get to really experience our unique and diverse ecosystems when they do a fish count within protected waters. We get some data on the habitat survey, and these are like useful points of reference for us if we're trying to work out some trends that we're seeing. So we can see, the kinds of habitats and also the vegetation type. And this mixed algae vegetation type, which was recorded in 91% of all of our surveys, that's kind of indicative of where people are actually surveying and that kind of reef system that we've really been championing like the whole night. So just a few basic stats there. The main data ends up being this kind of thing where we're looking at the percentage of the surveys that each of our species were recorded in and the abundance that you see them in. So for this year, and I think basically every year since the count started, it's the blue throat wrasse that has come in on top for being the most spotted fish. And they are quite, I guess, an easily recognizable fish. Both the males and the females do have these really bright bands. And they're quite a large fish for our waters, I suppose, and they're pretty noticeable, but they're also quite abundant. So not a surprise to see them there. Kind of heading towards the other end of the scale, things like our herring kale and our silver sweep don't kind of occur as often in our surveys. That's not necessarily saying that they're not there. And that's why we're interested to look at the kind of background data we were talking about. And things like the herring kale, they can be a little bit hard to spot because they're quite quick. If anyone's actually seen just like this blur of blue shoot past them if they're on a reef, like could have been a herring kale. Do the same thing for the sharks and rays. So you can see there again, obviously our smooth stingrays, again, these big, beautiful, relatively slow-moving things that, aren't particularly shy. So it's not really a surprise that we're seeing them in quite a lot of our surveys. On the other end of things, we've got things like the very carpet shark, which again are kind of more of like a hidden species, and they tend to kind of hang out, in shelters during the day. So we're probably not overly surprised that these are the kind of the trends that we're seeing. What we can do is we can start throwing up a lot of colours. We really are working on a way to present this a little bit more in a visually appealing way as the years go on, but we can compare year to year. And so you can see there's a bit of noise, but again, you know, in terms of the sort of more commonly seen fish, it's been pretty consistent over the years. And these are kind of some of the lesser seen fish. And again, it's, you know, there's a bit of variation, but yeah, fairly similar trends. Sharks and rays, we've actually only been recording them since 2017, so we've got fewer years to work with, but still seeing kind of similar numbers across a lot of the species there. So one thing we do sort of say is at the end of a fish count, we go, okay, so are there any kind of surprises? Are we seeing like a little bit of a drop off in fish that we have normally seen in, you know, reasonable abundance over the years? Why is that? And the other thing we can do is we can put a call out to you people to do the fish count for the next year and say, look, these are the fish that certainly, yeah, keep a bit of an eye out for. If you have cameras, that's great, because if you can take a photo of those fish, it certainly helps us with the confidence in the data. These two in particular, really, really interested if someone does see them. They are the elephant fish in the top there and the harlequin fish. Now the harlequin fish, we do not believe is actually, I guess, we think it's functionally extinct in Victoria, so it hasn't been seen in Victoria for many, many years. So it's more that we put it out there to keep it on people's radar. It's a really interesting fish. It is present along the Great Southern Reef in other areas. It just hasn't been recorded in Victoria for many, many years. So if you do think you see one, please try and get a photo of it, because it would make our lives a lot easier in verifying that that occurrence. The one in the top there, the elephant fish, hasn't been recorded in a fish count yet, but that footage and photo was actually taken at Blairgowrie at the start of the year. So they are around, or they can be around. It sort of depends on their breeding, because they'll come into shallower waters for breeding. But yeah, they do exist. It's a really weird looking fish, I'll give you that. So you're probably not going to confuse it with anything else. And yeah, please do keep an eye out for that one. If you really want to get into the numbers and sort of sit there and pour through everything, we do have all of our fish count reports up on our website. So check out that link. I'm sure Cade can throw up the links in the chat. And again, thanks to Shandy and also to India, who helped us put together the 2020 report, because it's looking really nice. Every year for the fish count, we kind of select a feature fish, the fishy face of the count. And so last couple of years, again, we've had some pretty Great Southern Reef staples there, and we decided that this year, no different, we're going to go with the Senator Wrasse. We felt like we certainly did, and we hoped that maybe other people would appreciate kind of the injection of colour that this particular fish could give to the count, and also to the t-shirts. So this is the logo. You'll see kind of the male wrasse is going to be the one on the t-shirts, because we are limited in our colours for our shirts. But we thought it kind of encapsulates this idea of, you know, the Great Southern Reef being this interconnected system, and it really is right across the Southern Reef. And we want to kind of celebrate that connectivity, especially in Victoria, where we are hopefully, you know, returning to that connectivity, and we're going to be able to get out back into the nature that we love and miss, and also connect with other people that enjoy it as well. So here's looking up to that, I guess. For a bit of a brief rundown of how to fish count in 2021, well, we're going to do the same thing we did in 2020. And for 2020, our fishy face was the scaly fin. So we're going to say, do as the scaly fin do. Explore your home turf. We probably will be able to move around a little bit more than we were in 2020, but we do still, as I said at the start, encourage you guys to kind of adopt a local area that you can go back to time and time again. It's not to say that you can't explore all the coast, by all means, but that's just kind of where this is coming in. For those of you that can't host an event, we do actually list public events on our website. They'll be going up next week, so keep an eye out for that, and you might be able to join in somewhere near you. For those of you that aren't sick to death of screens and aren't about to throw your computer in the bin, we are going to do some virtual counts again this year. So watch this space. Effectively what we like to do is we'll call them fish count, you know, fish count Thursdays, fish count lunchtimes, and we're just going to pick some times during the basically middle of the day, middle of the week. So you can come and join us on a lunch break or whatever, and we'll just have a bit of a chat while we watch the fish go by. When you guys are out there, obviously follow the restrictions. They're there for a reason. We want this to work. So everyone else has had fun with these keep 1.5 meter things apart. So we thought we'd do it too. If any of you have ever seen an adult Western blue grouper, that's about 1.5 meters. So keep that apart. Obviously, when you're in the water, social distance, it's pretty easy. And the third one, inspired by our stars of the reef cam, is don't be camera shy. So Scaly Fin love cameras. We hope you love cameras. We can actually help by lending you some cameras. If you want to give one of the Olympus Tufts, which are a really good underwater camera, a try, we can loan it out to you. And we do, again, every year, really encourage, probably now borderline beg, that if you get an unusual sighting on one of your surveys, please try and get a photo of it and please send it in. If you think it's a fish that probably shouldn't actually be there, we're partnered with RedMap. So we do encourage you to send that there, and that can help RedMap track basically species range shifts due to climate change. If you just don't know what you've taken a photo of, but you're pretty sure it's not one of the fish count species, you can always add it to our Marine Life of Victoria iNaturalist project, and one of the really enthusiastic iNat experts or just general users will be able to help you ID it. The other thing I'm going to do before I wrap up is a shameless plug for the October sea slug census, which is not a fish count thing, but I am hoping that within everyone's current restriction levels and everything, that if you can get out to the coast on the weekend of the 22nd to the 25th of October, and you are having a bit of a look around and you find a sea slug, take a photo of it, send it in to us. October is usually a pretty active time for our Victorian nudibranchs, and this is obviously another project that I'm quite passionate about. I know that not everyone is going to be able to get out there this time around. Don't worry, there'll be another census in the future. There'll be plenty more. But if you are interested, again, the details are all there on our website, so check that out. And lastly, if you want to get involved in the fish count this year, you can contact myself or Kate, or if you just want to know what else we're doing in ReefWatch, especially coming into, I guess, a bit more of a open summer, he's hoping, and a few more projects in the pipeline for the future. So that's pretty much where I'm going to leave it. I know I power through these things because we run out of time every time. But I did just want to leave it at the fact that I am missing all of your fishy faces. Really hanging out with you guys at the fish count is, yeah, one of the highlights of my job. And I really hope that we can get out and see you all again sometime soon. The host hat back on, and we'll jump into some questions before we wrap up. So I did see this question that I want to put to the panel perhaps, which is, do we think that the Great Southern Reef as an entity can be harnessed to protect areas like the 12 Apostles from, say, the drilling threats that we're hearing about?
Yeah, I can start it off. I think you kind of mentioned it in my intro, and I say this all the time, but I really think that people protect what they love and they love what they understand. And if we want the end goal to be protection and awareness of these things, we really need to be showing people how amazing these places are and increasing that understanding of how significant and how critical they are, not just to what we personally get out of them, but to our economy, to our industries, et cetera. And that's definitely where the Great Southern Reef project comes in, where we're trying to tackle that first part. And we believe that once that understanding is addressed, that the flow and effects we see can be really significant.
Yeah, I agree. Oh, Shannon, you got one?
Yeah, I can just add to that. Because I watched a bit of the debate that was streamed live from Parliament House last night about the vote that happened, which was about whether to disallow an approval given to actually do some onshore offshore gas drilling off the 12 Apostles. And I didn't watch all of it, so I can't say for sure, but I'm pretty sure there was never a mention of the Great Southern Reef. So I think definitely, as you know, it's obviously challenging getting the word out there to everyone, but there's probably definitely an opportunity to be approaching, decision makers and policy makers and people in government to and even the folks that are actually in charge of these projects as well, just so they have a bit more of a knowledge. And I think that using the Great Southern Reef as the icon that it is could be, I guess, leverage so that we can actually get some more research, because the reality is we don't know. We know a little bit about what the impacts, what these activities, offshore gas drilling and seismic testing have, but we still don't know a lot. So there's a good opportunity there.
I'm also going to take this opportunity for another little plug on that note. My old PhD supervisor and I and a few other colleagues are writing a white paper with that specific goal in mind. So it's meant to be this like a mini book almost that just covers every element of what the Great Southern Reef is, why it's so important, why it's under threat, and the direction that we should be moving to be protecting it for the unique asset that what it is. So our idea with that is that it can be this one centralized go-to place that someone who has never heard about the reef before can open it up, have a flick through, and can get a deep enough understanding to make those kinds of management decisions. So stay tuned, that one's coming.
Fantastic. I saw a question earlier. I don't know whether we've answered in the QA, but I just thought this would kind of be funny more than anything. So I'm going to ask, does Port Phillip Bay count as an ocean? And I'm only saying this because I do find the definitions of our bays quite funny. But who wants to jump in on that one? Or nominate if no one does. Sarah gets a break because she's from Western Australia.
Yeah, I know. Don't ask me.
How about Prue? What's your opinion?
Look, this is personal opinion, so please don't go yelling at me. I would say that it is because it's connected, and I know that was one of the questions that we had to the panel was, is sponge gulls or bryozoan marine environment as part of the Great Southern Reef. So I think it was mentioned, Nicole, in what you were talking about, that the Great Southern Reef is this interconnectivity of all the marine environments, and I think the same goes with oceans. If it's connected into our bays, our even going into our estuaries, whatever connects in is all part of the process. And I think our coastlines and what we do here on land is also connected to the ocean. So I don't think we can call it a bay, but I think it's also part of the ocean and it's part of the Great Southern Reef. And we need to keep branding it as the Great Southern Reef, where it's a sponge garden, a seagrass habitat, seagrass meadow, bare sandy bottom in Port Phillip Bay. It's still the Great Southern Reef. It's still equally important and equally amazing. And we just need to keep that branding going and keep it consistent across all those marine environments. That's my take.
Yeah, I think we can leave it. We can leave it there. Otherwise, I guess I could ask Shannon her thoughts on whether Western Port's a bay or a port or whatever it is. But we'll be here forever. We've got a question. Do the Great Southern Reef educational materials include the role of marine algae in producing oxygen for the planet's atmosphere? So quite an important topic.
Yeah, one of the first lesson plans we put together was all about seaweeds. So we call it super seaweeds, and the content directed at Year 9s is available up on our website right now. But that is an entire lesson dedicated to seaweeds and the important role that marine plants in general play, not just in producing oxygen, but as habitat, as food, as carbon storers. It covers the whole lot. And we've got some really cool videos on there as well, which, you guys should go check out.
Awesome. And I think we'll be at ReefWatch doing a bit of a plug on our socials and things for that as well too, for you, Sarah. Right, I've got one more question that we haven't answered yet. And it's a question to Prue, and it's saying, how much will the book cost? How can we get our hands on your wonderful book when it's out there?
Oh, good question. I've been strategically avoiding it because I'm actually not sure. It's really bad to say that because since it's getting published by Sahira, and they have told me, and please don't quote me, but I think it's $24.95-ish, around that. It's about $25. But I could be wrong. I think that's what I think of when they first told me way back when we started. So one thing I've learned about publishing a children's book is that it takes time. So we actually started writing this story last year, and we're I guess in contract negotiations with Sahira Publishing probably at around about March, April last year. And now we're just at the point of the story now. We've got the proofs, we've got all the spreads have been done, the writing's been finessed. So now the next stage is to start getting it to the editing process. Well, it's gone through it. The next thing is to start printing it. So it's been a long process. So when we first got told how much it was going to be, it was last year during COVID, and there was lots of things going on. So I think it's around $25.
No worries. I've got Kate in the background telling me that I should also plug a book that we're writing. So just so everyone knows, in case you haven't heard about it, we are actually producing a guide to Victorian sea slugs. So a kind of picture-based guide, as well as a bit of information around those funky little mollusks that I love. And we've had a lot of our reef watchers, our sea slug census contributors, graciously share their photos with us so that we can give you guys a really cool resource to get out there and kind of like learn a little bit more about these creatures and try and find them, especially if you're going to be snorkeling or diving on the reef. And I can also concur, Prue, it takes a while to write a book. So we've got some cool little I've got some cool little resources in the chat if people want to have a look at that. I think what I will do is I'll officially close the webinar for the night. We'll be here for a little bit, just sort of shutting things down and making sure we've got everything, got everyone's comments and questions, because if there's anything else we can kind of answer and follow up with for you guys, we'll send that out in our kind of summary email we'll send out later. So feel free to jump off now, guys, if you need to, go and get dinner or put the kids to bed or put yourself to bed or whatever. Thank you so much for everybody who has joined us tonight and who continues to support ReefWatch. I would really like to thank our panelists for joining in today. I'd like to give special thanks to Kate, who is kind of running everything in the background. And I would also like to thank any of our VNPA supporters and donors that have tuned in tonight. The VNPA is a really small organisation that works collaboratively with a lot of other organisations, and most importantly with the community. And it's in an ongoing effort to ensure that Victoria's natural assets, including our marine spaces, can be enjoyed now and protected for generations to come. So your support means the world to us. And if you would like to get more involved or are able to support us in any way, that would be amazing, greatly appreciated, and just get in touch. So that's really it from us. All I really wanted to say at the end here was just hang in there, Victoria, Melbourne especially. Not long now before we'll be able to connect once again with each other, and hopefully with also the marine spaces that we love and miss. So see you guys out there soon, and hopefully we can catch some fish together. We'll say bye.